Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen, Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Alhamdulillah, we've reached the book of fasting, Kitab al-Sawm. And so we've managed to complete Tahara, we've completed Salah, we've completed Zakat, and now with alhamd, we've moved on to Sawm. So who must fast? Or what is fasting? First and foremost, right? That's the most important thing.
Patience.
Fasting is patience. All right? Patience is definitely a part of it. I agree. Well, we'll talk about the why also.
Most gym gains.
What else? We fast every year, right? This is one of the 5 pillars. There's no, I think we all, inshallah, I hope we know that. Right? It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's something that is very fundamental. It's something that's very important. We also know that there's a reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it one of the 5 pillars. And I think we spoke about this before. What is the commonality between the 5 pillars of Islam? Like, these are the pillars, right? These are the foundations of the religion. So these 5 pillars, what do they have in common? And what is the relationship between the 5 pillars of Islam and the 6 pillars of Iman? What is the fundamental difference between them?
One is the belief and the other actions.
Okay, one is in actions, for sure. Which one is in actions? The Islam or Iman? Islam, right? Islam is, it's clearly actions, right? Whether it be statement on the tongue, whether it be actions in the limbs, whether it be certain rights and regulations that we have to do, whether it be withholding, as in the case of fasting, right? Fasting, Sawm, Imsak, or withholding or holding back from something, right? And that's something that's really important to keep in mind. And the 6 pillars, and not just that, many of these things are quantifiable, right? Like we can count, when we talk about the pillars of Islam, you can actually count them, right? There's a number of units, number of days, sometimes hours, number of tawaf, number of circumambulation that happens. All of those things are quantifiable. But when we talk about, for example, the pillars of Iman, when we talk about the pillars of belief, are those quantifiable things? Can I say I believe in Allah 7, right? Or I believe in angels 10, right? It's not something that's actually quantifiable. It's much more abstract. It's much more abstract, and which is why it is the second station, right? It is the second maqam after Islam. Who has to fast? Do all of you have to fast? Yes. Okay, good. So we've narrowed it down. And why do we have to fast? Okay. Healthy, that there's a little, we'll put an asterisk next to healthy. I hope so. What else? Okay, ability, which has to do with health. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Sanity.
Okay, sanity, right? We're all here, right? Inshallah.
Being adult.
Being an adult. Good. What else?
Is freedom a condition?
Freedom is not a condition. No. Unfortunately, even slaves have to fast. So we have sanity, we have adulthood. What other conditions?
Purity for women?
Okay, and those are, I would say, exceptional cases, right? Because that case of when she's not pure, does that exempt her from fasting altogether?
Yeah.
Right? It just gives her a break. And not just that, she has to what? She has to make them up. So it's not a complete. What else? What if the person is non-Muslim? Do they have to fast? Right? Like this first and most important, right? The person has to be Muslim. So the person has to be Muslim, right? I think we all agree on that. Second, the person has to be an adult. The person has to be sane, as you mentioned. The person has to be capable. And we'll talk about capability, what that means, because there actually should be like an asterisk there. There should be an asterisk next to capability. And it's recommended for what group of people? Not for children. Right? It's recommended for children. When should a child start fasting? Huh? When should a child start fasting?
When you can beat him.
Huh?
When you can beat him.
When you can beat him? Okay. I mean, is there Is there floor age for discipline? You can't beat that. So, which brings up an interesting point. The Prophet ﷺ, he said what concerning the prayer and our children? Teach them when they're 7 and and discipline them when they are 10. And I use the word discipline on purpose here, right? Or you can use the word spank, right? Because both of these have a very similar connotation. What is the difference between discipline and spanking and beating, right? All of these are words that are used to express the same thing. What is the difference between them?
Discipline is, I guess it can vary.
Oh, so can beating, right?
Discipline's like when they use them calling and beating,
Mhm.
like abuse.
Okay, right. So there's one term that's actually linked to abuse, and there are two terms, or the other two terms aren't always linked to abuse. And there's a reason that I like translating it a certain way, right? It has a very different connotation, because when I say beat, it can either be for discipline or it actually can be for abuse. So it's recommended for children. So saying that, am I not allowed to discipline my child before 7? If my 5-year-old lies, right, he's going to get it, right? Meaning what? That can I order my child to pray before 7? Absolutely, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But the age where the Prophet ﷺ recommends that we start with them is generally at the age of 7. And why is that? What happens at 7? Right, there's tamyiz, right? There's tamyiz. And what does, discernment is usually how it's translated. What does that mean? What does it mean that the child has the ability now to discern, or is mumayyiz? Okay, they have a general idea of right and wrong. Sure. What else? Sure. So I think kids are always observant, right? That, it's actually very surprising and amazing how observant kids are. A good way for me, like the way I like framing it, is that if I tell the child to go and do something, they'll probably do it. So if I tell my 5-year-old to go get me a glass of water, on the way she'll stop and start coloring. Why? Because she doesn't have, she doesn't have that discernment. She doesn't have that focus. She doesn't have full comprehension of orders, these type of things. But if I tell my 7-year-old, there's a much better chance. It doesn't mean that he or she is going to not stop and start coloring, but the chances of that happening are significantly less. The chances of them playing during prayer, they're significantly less, right? The younger they are, the more chances there are that they'll actually get up, that they'll actually walk away, that they're not going to pay attention to the actual prayer. So why do we fast? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, so that you may be mindful of Allah, so that you may have taqwa, right? Taqwa is usually translated as God consciousness. Some people translate it as fear, and there are a number of ways to actually express it. I think God consciousness is the best way to actually translate it and deal with it as a term, as an understanding. How is fasting a vehicle for taqwa? What is unique about fasting that we don't find in other actions? It's difficult to, you technically can, right? So you bring yourself into places and situations where there's food, and you'd be like, no, brother, I'm fasting, right? It's more challenging. But somebody who's really creative, they can find a way to even show off with the fasting. But the chances are definitely less, right? You have to make more of an outward effort to show off the fast. That's one part of it, right? It's a more of a internal ibadah. Everybody sitting here, it's after Maghrib now, but in general, everybody sitting here, there's no sign to differentiate between the person who's fasting and the person who is not, right? They both would physically look the same, versus the person who's in prayer and the person who is out of it, right? You can tell, you can see the difference between the two. Or the person who is giving zakat and the person who is not, right? You can't tell, you can tell the difference in that situation. Or the one who's making hajj, right? The haji, he's going to be wearing the ihram, and the one who isn't going to be. So it is a very apparent action. The fasting is more of a hidden action, okay? Which brings us a little bit more understanding into why it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually specified this as a vehicle for taqwa. What else? What happens in fasting?
I would say you fasting in a constant control of yourself and mindful of what, because you cannot drink,
Sure.
you cannot eat, you cannot engage in intimacy.
Okay. It's more of a consistent consciousness.
Every moment, every
Sure.
hour,
Sure.
it's so often, almost like constant, nonstop.
Okay. So you're consistently in a state of awareness, right? That
As you mentioned, when you pray, okay.
because like
It's 10 minutes.
it's like food shooting at you. You have to be like,
Well, yeah, people just recall it. People can forget it that they're fasting.
Sure,
They just,
absolutely, absolutely.
accidentally-
No, but there definitely is a raised level of awareness. I agree with that 100%. It's sometimes we make it out to be like the struggle, like we don't eat. The first few days, I think it is, yeah, or like someone who has like a caffeine problem. But in general, is fasting a huge demand?
Some people who have a good diet.
Yeah, so for some people, sometimes it's just a small adjustment to their diet. Some people, definitely. Are there individuals where it's very challenging for? Yeah, absolutely. I don't deny that. But as an overall demand from mankind and overall demand for the Ummah Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it's not particularly demanding. Maybe for those people who live in like the extreme north or south, during the summer months where the days are like 20 hours long or 22 hours long, I could definitely see that.
It's an inaction, not an action.
Right. So it's it's withholding,
Effort, yeah.
right? It's a inaction, right? That's a good way of describing it. So what else is unique about fasting? What else happens? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he chooses 3 very unique things to take away.
You say you live in halal.
Zain. Yeah. Perfect. Right. So it's not even about, okay, hey, during fasting, you got to make extra efforts to stay away from those things that are haram. You're actually staying away from those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislated and allowed. So I'm staying away from these things that are mubah. I'm staying away from these things that are halal to show me that if it's that easy to stay away from things that are permitted for me, it should be that much easier for me to stay away from those things which are prohibited. Good. The 3 things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away from us is our food, our drink, and our intimacy. On a regular day, if one of these 3 things is taken away from an individual, what happens? You become cranky, right? You become upset. So what is a message, or what is something that we can learn from that? Normally, if one of these are taken away, right? I'm not even talking about all 3. The person becomes cranky. And that crankiness, who does it affect? It affects others. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said about the individual who is fasting, that when he gets into an argument, what should he do? I heard like a lot of mumbling, right? He said, I'm fasting. So is he telling the person in front of him so the person stops fighting? Right, it's a reminder for ourselves. And sometimes saying things, sometimes verbalizing things is a good internal reminder of why we're doing what we're doing and who we're doing it for. So that interaction portion of it is something that we see as important, we see as fundamental. And it is at those moments that taqwa becomes very important. Why? You say taqwa mu'amala. My taqwa is my dealing with other people. So here, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken away those things that normally make me cranky, I am now being tested, not necessarily immediately with those things, right? And one of the reasons it's easy for us to stay away from food and drink is why? Like during Ramadan, what is one of the things that makes it easier to stay away from food and drink? I mean, there are things that distract us, but not just that. How many of us don't know the minute that we're going to eat? Does that make sense?
Very few people don't know.
Right, there's very few people who don't know the second that they're not going to eat and what it is that they're going to eat. And when I know exactly, as a person, as a being, if I know that this is the time that I'm going to eat, how much does that make the fast easier or more difficult? It makes it easier because now I have a very specific, clear goal in my mind. And I'm like, okay, well, and we do it, right? All of us do it. Like we'll glance down at our watch during, oh, man, there's like 3 hours left. Right, let me take a nap. You know what I mean? And we'll start doing different things to fill our time in order to get to that goal. The one thing that is difficult to avoid is our interactions, right? This is one of the most challenging things to avoid. And during Ramadan, what do we usually have more of in the masajid? We have more people. And when we have more people, what accompanies the people? Huh? More arguments, right? We tend to have more fighting and more arguments during Ramadan, which is sad. Because one of the things that we're actually being tested with is how to deal with people. Allah has taken us to the end of our stick, right? He's taken us to the end of our patience. So in this moment now, you have to show your best. In this moment where you're normally upset, this is where you have to actually be good with others. In this moment of frustration is where you really have to control yourself. And that's where many of us, if not most of us, fail. I know I did. Like there was occasions where I just, I was making coffee and what I would do is I would be here, I would grind the coffee, I would put it in the machine. Right after Salat al-Maghrib, I would come and I would just press the button, it'd be ready to come out. So I came after Salah and there was a brother who was in there who had taken it and dumped it out. And I yelled at him. I was like, what, did you not pray? Like, where were you? I just we did taslim and it came out, like, what's going on? And blah, blah. And alhamdulillah, I realized and I apologized. But subhanAllah, if we really think about it, like that's exactly what's going on. That like the time I was supposed to show patience, the time that is blessed, the time that is mubarak, the time where I deal with people, that's where, we should show even more restraint. Because if we can do it in that moment, it makes it that much easier in moments where we have all of those things back in our life. And Allah knows best. So when do we fast? And this is for like all Muslims, right? In Ramadan, right? Ramadan is the time that we fast. And there are 3 major reasons that it happens. When the 30th of Sha'ban comes, the next day we know for sure is Ramadan, right? There's no 31 days of Sha'ban. The sighting of the crescent moon. So when the crescent moon is seen, then that night is the beginning of Ramadan. And lastly, if the night of the 30th of Sha'ban is cloudy. So if you have the last day that is cloudy, you can use that as a means because you can't actually see the moon to determine the beginning of Ramadan. What is not mentioned? The most controversial one, calculation. Allahu Akbar. Is it permissible to calculate? So how is the sighting established? Let's talk about in the madhāhib first, right? So generally in the madhāhib, it is these 3 ways. How is the sighting established? If I want to sight the moon, how many people do I need? 4, 2. Anyone else? 2 males. Anyone else? Just a lone sight. You can have a single sighting of this. Now, who is this established on? This is a reference. Yeah. So, ala hasab madhab. And it also depends if you're talking about the beginning or the end. Yeah, unfortunately, this guy's got to make things complicated. Like, it's nice, what I mean? And this lone sighting, even the khilaf is, subhanAllah, in this, who does it have to be? Can it be a male who establishes the sighting of the moon? Or can it be a female? It has to be a male? Huh? Women can't see? It's like, come on, the witness of 1 man is equal to 2 women. What are you talking about?
I think that
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. What's wrong with you women? In the madhab, if you actually go back to Mughni, Ibn Qudama, the same author of this book, he mentions that it can even be a woman. So it tells us, and what does this tell us? It tells us that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the witness of 2 women being equal to that of 1 man, it is in specific transactions, and many scholars say only in financial transactions. So if I ask a woman which direction the qibla is, and she tells me it's in this direction, in the madhab, I am now able to take her witness, and that is enough for me to pray in that direction. The sighting of the moon is another example. And there are very specific examples that he brings to talk about who that person can be. And he mentions that it can even be a female. Sorry, so if a lone sighting is enough to begin the beginning of Ramadan, and this is and the Shafi'iyya, that if one person sees it, that's enough. That's good enough, right? There's no problem with that. It's not an issue with it. He follows the congregation regardless, right? This is a minority opinion in the madhāhib. What does that leave us with? That leaves us with it's enough to begin, but it's not enough to end. Yes.
You mentioned that one person is enough.
Yeah.
That person has to be Muslim.
Oh, of course, yeah, of course. That's the only condition, that the person has to be Muslim. Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's so these type of things when we talk about the witness of a non-Muslim, when we talk about the testimony of a non-Muslim doctor, for example, like in these situations, why is it that we reject their witness? Why is it that we reject their testimony? Because there could be lying. Allahu Akbar. Muslims don't lie. Pious. I love the pious Muslims. What is the reason? Right, exactly. And that's all it is. For an individual who ascribes himself to the religion, it's important to him, right? This is something that is important to him. This is something that's important to her. And they're going to understand the religious responsibility that's associated with it. The thing with the non-Muslim is it as important to them? No. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil or that they're lying or we're going to ruin their Ramadan. No, right? It's not everybody has that mindset. Are there individuals who do? Yeah, absolutely, for sure. But in general, it's important to understand that the people who are vested in this, like there are people who are invested in this endeavor, those are the people that we're going to rely on. So for example, if I go to ask a doctor about fasting, like, hey, what kind of effect is this going to have on my health? I am going to ask a Muslim doctor, because the Muslim doctor is himself invested in the religion and is going to want to do as much as he can to help you fast. For the non-Muslim, what is the priority? Your health. Sure, go ahead.
Is the one person decides that it's like one person decides the moon, just like everybody has to follow?
And that's a good question. And that's what these three opinions are. Right. So if it's a lone sighting and some of the Shafis, they'll say that this individual has to, when he sees the moon at the beginning or the end, that's when he starts fasting, that's when he breaks his fast. The minority opinion in the Hanabila, it doesn't matter what you see. Follow the congregation. And the majority, they view it's enough to begin, but it is not enough to end. And can anyone's testimony be accepted? We said that as long as the person is Muslim. And the madhāhib, they agree on this, that a lone testimony may be accepted to begin Ramadan, but two witnesses are required to establish the end of Ramadan. What about calculations? We'll get back to why this is, right? I want to ask why this. Yeah.
At the moment, present, we are not really depending sightseeing.
Yeah.
We have the calendar already set.
So for this masjid, yes. So there are a number of different masajid that use different ways and different techniques. You have some places who have a hybrid model. So for example, and I understand that this is debatable, when I was in Saudi, what they did is they print the calendar for the next 10 years. Done, printed. But they adjust when? They adjust for Ramadan or for Dhul Qa'dah. Those, again, they claim is based on the actual sighting. Why do they print the calendar for 10 years? For logistic purposes, right? So that they can actually have something that when they make plans and when they do things. And the reason that they can do that is because even if the sighting is off and even if the calculation is off for them, eventually what's going to happen? They'll match back up, right? Eventually they're going to match back up. So when we talk about, and this is the last discussion, which is about calculations. Are calculations a reasonable way or a reasonable method of determining the beginning and the end of Ramadan? And this is a highly contested, highly debatable issue, very problematic for a lot of people. So to calculate or to not calculate, right? That is the question. And this is something that, again, it has become more of a issue of modern discussion. And do we have classical views on this? Let's see. So calculations are not allowed. This is the camp that says, okay, you're not allowed to calculate. You're not allowed to use calculations at all. Basically, they're not saying that you can't use calculations to figure out when to look, right? They're not saying that. They're saying that you can use the calculations, but the calculations can only be used where? Right, around the time, like to help you determine, like, should I go out and look or not? Right, that's the only time that they say that. That's what they're saying when they mean it can't be used. But can I just sit in my house and just, just look at the calculations of when deciding is supposed to be, and that be enough for me, for this group? No, it's not enough. And they'll say based on the apparent understanding of the hadith, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, you start, sumu bi-ru'yati, like fast when you see the hilal, when you see the crescent moon. So they're saying, okay, well, the apparent hadith is it has to do, and it is based off of sight. They say there's no clear position of the scholars of the past. They said this is something that is new. This is not something that was done before. There's no scholars that have actually claimed this, and there are no scholars that have indicated this. And they say even the limited allowance may be to initiate Ramadan, not end it. And again, we'll talk about this. Why is it that there is so much lax and so much ease in the beginning, and why is there so much stringentness and so much harshness in the end? So what about the scholars who allow it? So calculations are allowed. They say calculations already occur with prayers and other lunar and solar events. What is something that we use for calculations daily? The salah, right? So now it's not like, okay, do we have a single hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said Salat al-Asr today is going to be at 4:47? We don't, right? There's nothing like that. How are the prayer times established? By the position of the sun. So these scholars, they would answer and they say, okay, no, this is taqribi, right? That what you're saying is just to get an idea. It's not to actually establish the beginning and end. And I would argue, no, it actually is. People, when do we break our fast? Does anybody go up to the roof of Dar al-Hijrah and be like, all right, guys, we're good? No, it's not his hand. Tafadhal, ya akhi.
There's also not a demand to see the sun to reception. Prayer time after race of the
There is. Because the Prophet ﷺ, what did he say that the beginning and the end of time was? How else is it established?
So you have to see it with your eye.
Yeah, you have to, yeah. Like when he said, when the shadow gets to this length. When he said, when the sun is in this position, right? You have a specific hadith that talk about that, yeah.
Like he doesn't say you have to see it with your eye like he does with the moon sign. So it's a little different. There's not that command. You have to see it with your eye.
Okay.
You can try to look at the shadow and the position by
Mhm.
calculation. I mean, there's no.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's just a little different in that respect.
I understand. So the Prophet ﷺ, the answer to that would even the Prophet ﷺ said, فَقَدِّرُوا, right? So you still have that okay, when there's overcast, he still allows it to say, he says, okay, he says, قَدِّرُوا, what's a good way of translating that?
And
Yeah.
I'm not saying.
No, you're not saying either or. I understand what you're saying. No, I get it. You're saying that because there's not a clear command to actually look, then that analogy can't apply.
It's more leeway.
It gives more leeway. I get it. I completely understand. Other lunar events, when an individual, like for example, now practically what happens, and I'm not talking about necessarily it being right or wrong, when a woman when her husband dies, does she go out at the end of every month to look at sighting of the moon, or in general, will she follow the calendar? And if she does, is she right or wrong? If an individual promises to fast for 2 months, and we're not talking about solar months, we're talking about lunar months, is he obligated now to go outside every night and determine that, or is it enough for him to follow the calculations? In a very practical sense, this is something that has been happening. This is not something new. This is not something that happened within the past couple of years. This is something that has been going on for some time. Astronomers they've been telling us when the new moon is to be born and when the sightings happen. So very practically, this is something that has been going on. It's not something that's new. It's not something that was just started. The hadith that we talked about, where the Prophet ﷺ said, when there's ghaim, when there's overcast, so then approximate. That's a good translation of it. So then approximate. Or calculate is a good one. No, and even calculate is a good way of translating it too. Absolutely. And then there are classical scholars who it has been recorded that they allowed calculations. The first of them, Mutarrif ibn Abdullah ibn Shakhir, he was a tabi'i, died very early. So he narrated on, I think, Ibn Umar, he narrated on Aisha, he narrated on Abu Dharr, he narrated on many of the great companions. And he's very early on from their students. There's a number of companions who he studied under. Ibn Qutayba, who was a muhaddith, also relatively early, 276, and Abu Abbas ibn Surayj, ibn al-Shafi'iyya, he also allowed it. So you do have classical scholars who did hold this position, or who allowed calculations to be taken into account. You have arguments on both sides. And it is what it is. Either you're going to say they're okay, or the proofs aren't strong enough, or you're going to say that the proofs are strong enough concerning that. So what has happened is that a number of masajid have decided to go the calculations route. A number of masajid have decided to follow that. Dar al-Hijra is one of them. So when we have the printed calendar, we follow it based on the calculations, except for Dhul Hijjah. They make an exception because of Hajj. So why so much focus on the end? Why is there's laxness in determining the beginning of Ramadan, but why is there so much? Why are they so strict in determining the end?
Not to finish early on.
Right.
You can start early and you'll catch.
You'll still catch it. Ahsan.
But you don't want to start early than it should be.
Right. So I'm saying even if we start a day early, what's going to happen?
Nothing.
It'll be an extra fast, right? But if I finish a day early, what happens? I'm missing out on an obligatory fast. Yes. Yeah. What about the 31st?
Yeah.
And it happens, right? So, and where does that usually happen when you have 31 days? No, calculations will never come up with 31. Yes. When you're traveling, ahsant. Right? When you're traveling, that's actually when it happens. So what happens is the country that you started in, they started when? Early. And the country that you're landing in, they start a day late. So what do you do?
Follow the community.
Follow the community. And your Ramadan is 31 days. and that extra fast is considered a nafli fast. So there, like we said, there's lower risk in the beginning, meaning that even if you start early, the worst that'll happen is that you'll have an extra nafli fast. That's the worst that'll happen versus ending early, which requires more stringency, which requires a little bit more establishment. Yeah.
So the person who cites the moon, doesn't have to be severe, like I said,
I mean, so when we talk about testimony, you have a number of different conditions for testimony for that. And when we talk about somebody who comes forward with the testimony, yeah, these things are definitely taken into account, right? You know, you can't have like a drunkard come up and be like, "Hey, I saw the moon, I promise." You know, it doesn't work like that. The person actually does. There has to be a level of trust that's dedefinitely there for sure.
But the whole is everybody truthful, unless.
Of course, like, you know, so for the Muslim in general, when we talk about dealing with Muslims, yani al-asl salamat al-qasd, that when we deal with a Muslim, we assume automatically that they're honest and that they're truthful, unless there's something to show otherwise.
So let's say that when you are traveling from a country,
Yeah,
while the started has to be late.
yeah. Oh, so you have 28 days.
28 days.
Yeah, yeah.
29 days.
Yeah.
And the day of Eid, what should we do?
Okay, so what happens is if you have the opposite, right? So we said that what if you have 31 days? Like, what if you have 28? Like, by the time I get back to start, you make Eid with the community, and then what do? You fast. No, you don't pay. You fast. No. You just no. You don't fast Eid. After Eid, you fast because what do you treat it as if you missed a fast?
Do you fast 30 days?
No. You fast 29. No. I understand what you're saying. You fast 29. No, there's no penalty. There's no penalty. So there's penalty for traveling. It'll be qada. Oh, it'll be ada or qada. No, it'll be qada then. Okay, طيب. Okay, خلاص, yes. Like a captive is someone who doesn't have access to sunlight, someone who can't see, someone who is because of being a captive, what do you call it, captive of war, or an individual who might be stuck underground, or whatever the case might be. What does this individual do?
He does the judgment.
He calculates, right? He looks at, he goes to Islamic Finder, right? And he's like, is today Eid or not? So he does the best he can, right? And that's the most you can ask for in that situation. So, but there's a difference of opinion. Like, okay, what if he started early, right? What if he finished his fast? He does the best that he can, and he finishes all his fast before Ramadan starts.
29, 30 days?
Yeah. He does. He's like, what happened?
Wow.
Yeah, no, he doesn't know. Like he there's no way for him. Like, he doesn't access, and he just finished. Like, he does all 29 days before that, right? So basically, according to the Jamhur, is that if he started before, like if he finished before, his fasts are invalid. And yes, I know, Miskeen. Huh?
That's pretty unusual.
It's an unusual, like it's a very rare situation. It's a very unusual situation. But you have to understand, like these discussions, there might have been like an odd question, that had come up. But a lot of it, a lot of it is just like, yo, what about this? What I mean? Like, what would happen here, or what would happen in this situation, right? It's like you think about it, it's like, okay, you're sitting and you're going back and forth with your students, like, okay, if you can see, you can't see. Okay, well, what if you don't even have access? Like, no, what I mean? Like, it just goes to the logical end, and they're just like, okay, what if you get stuck underground? Like, there are just so many things that can happen. So the Jamhur, they say that if he does it before, it doesn't count. But what if he does it after? So before we said it doesn't count. After, they all agree that it actually would. Those exempted from fasting. You guys had mentioned some of them, and
I'm sorry, we say after we.
like, so for example, if you,
Ramadan?
so this individual, he's doing the best he can. He fasts in Shawwal, thinking it is Ramadan.
That would count?
That would count.
Like qada.
Yeah, I mean, because you can still treat it like qada, versus it's like praying before the time comes in.
So Sha'ban wouldn't count.
The Sha'ban wouldn't count. Shawwal would. Yeah, because exactly, because the reason didn't begin. Those exempted from fasting. So there, Ibn Qudama, Ibn Qudama, he mentions 4 categories. What do you think those categories are? Oh,
Traveler,
so the traveler, for sure.
the sick,
The one who's sick.
woman,
Okay, good.
The person who's like,
That's not an exemption. He's never obligated in the first place. An exemption is someone who's obligated but doesn't have to, or is excused. And the last one is a woman who's pregnant, right? A woman who's pregnant or breastfeeding. And in fact, and lastly, someone who has a permanent issue or a permanent problem. And there are 2 categories here. These people will all, what? They'll all make up their fast. And these individuals will, these people will pay the fidya. These people will actually pay. Yes.
So if you have like a parent who
Mhm.
can't fast.
Yeah.
Then there's
It depends on the situation, but in general, a person pays for himself. And what I'm sorry?
I was just gonna ask if they're not in the right situation, like,
Oh, if they're not sane,
yeah, example.
they're exempt altogether. They don't have to fast.
and their kids don't too.
The only time where that would, so where would the children have to pay for the father? What obligation? Huh? Like not just Sadaqat al-Fitr, but also zakat, right? Because we said in the Hanabila, the money is tied to, the zakat is tied to the money, not the person.
If the parent is sane, but chronically ill,
Yeah.
he must pay the fidya.
Yeah, he has to pay the
If
fidya.
he's poor,
Yeah.
the kid must pay for the parent.
So if he's poor, he might be excused altogether because he doesn't have the ability, right? Because we said ability is also, that's one of the things. And we'll talk about these categories, and some of them are easier than others. So when we talk about, so this person, the one who temporarily, meaning what? What kind of illness is this? Can I not fast because of a headache?
Maybe a migraine.
Maybe a migraine. Okay.
Maybe
Yeah, if it's a bad headache, that's right.
Okay.
Maybe there's
What if I got a paper cut?
Probably not.
Really? It's not gonna cut it,
headache maybe because of the bullet in the head.
right? Oh, because you're dead. You're dead. You don't have to fast. You don't have to fast at that point, right? He was in a coma, right? So if it's temporary, and one of the conditions that most of the madhāhib have put is the condition of the illness or the pain, right? It doesn't have to actually be an illness. It could be, we said a paper cut, no, but what if I got stabbed? Can I be excused?
If it's perhaps life-threatening.
Maybe, right? Not just life-threatening. What did we say?
Increases.
That if the fast would actually worsens the situation, right? If the fast worsens the situation. So if I have a headache, we say that what? It's not going to make it worse, but is it going to make it better?
No.
Not necessarily, right? So you're probably going to be at the same level whether you fast or not. In that situation, we would say that this person should fast. But a person has a migraine, and we know that the migraine, it exacerbates. It gets worse when he fasts. What should he do? Right? He should break his fast. Right? He should break his fast. Yes.
What if it exacerbates, but it's still tolerable?
So
It should be two conditions.
So, yeah, exactly. So if it exacerbates, now I have a choice. And if I do decide to fast, then what? I get rewarded.
But just the mere fact of increase
That's enough.
is enough.
That's enough for me to
Even if
excuse
it's
myself.
still tolerable.
Absolutely. Like, when they were traveling, what happened? That some of them fasted and some of them didn't. I'm sorry? So we said if it worsens the condition, he has a choice at that point. The next one, a woman who is menstruating or on postpartum bleeding. In either of, I'm sorry? Huh? Oh, the traveler, yeah. Who is the traveler? The 50 miles is good. I think it's the easiest. Just easy. Or should we go Dhahiri? Orf. It's like, oh man, I'm going half-hour drive. I go to DC, I'm traveling, right? So the traveler, when does he start fasting again? As long as he's traveling, he has a choice. And sometimes even I cheat a little bit with this one. So when I'm going somewhere, when I'm flying toward the sun, I'll usually fast. When I'm flying away from it, I usually will break my fast. I'm sorry? This is for, yes, this is what we're talking about. This is for Ramadan. For the,
So I remember in the chapter before,
yeah.
if I fasted and I did not travel before,
Oh, the setting of the sun.
no,
Oh.
before Fajr,
Yeah.
then I'm obligated to fast that day, even if I have a travel.
Oh, because you started off as a resident.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's the Hanafi thing.
Okay, that makes
Okay,
sense.
that's-
No, Jazakallah khair. So the Hanbalis are very lenient with this. Yeah.
So, I mean, according to this, it's like, if you're,
Even if you're intending on traveling.
right, so
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what part of the day, like, it's like lower time, and it's like lower, whatever, 2 p.m. and you
Yeah.
start traveling. then
So
Okay.
it becomes a little bit more complicated if you've already started fasting. Is that, yeah. Okay, no, if you've already started fasting, then you're obligated to complete your fast.
You're obligated.
Wait.
While there's an agreement on what? While you are traveling, right? There's an agreement here. There's no difference on that. But when do you become a traveler, and what started first, your travel or your fast? That's also part of it. Meaning, at Fajr, I got up, I prayed Fajr, and then after an hour, I'm getting ready and I'm traveling. I have to continue. But if I know I'm traveling, this is the thing, it's the same situation. I know I'm traveling and I decide not to fast. That's fine too. In the madhāhib, it's okay. In the madhāhib, it's okay. But if I started fasting, I am now obligated to complete it.
But isn't it, I heard many times when
Yeah.
you're fasting, it's a daytime, but if once you left the city, you
Mhm.
cross the fifth month, you can break your fast.
I'll double check, but I don't, that's not what I know. I know that once you've started fasting, you're obligated not to complete it. So, which is a problem. Which is a problem like also the time you get on a plane to go to China.
And I also heard, and I also heard you must start fasting,
Yeah.
but I mean, if your plan is the whole time, you
Yeah.
must start fasting until the whole until you are traveling. That's what I heard.
Can you say that again?
Meaning, you're traveling
Mm.
during the daytime.
Okay.
You must.
So I've-
start fasting.
I've started traveling.
No, you are
Okay.
still in the, at home, you're a resident.
Okay.
In your city.
Have I started fasting already?
You started.
Okay,
fasting.
so I'm
You
fast-
must start fasting.
Right, yeah, so I have
You
to.
know you'll be traveling during
Okay.
later during the lower time,
Mhm,
but you must start fasting.
mhm.
Once you left the city.
You can
then
break your fast?
Break your fast.
Wow. I'll look into it. Inshallah. So over here, a woman who is menstruating on postpartum bleeding, what does she do? She makes it up. She makes it up. A woman who is pregnant or breastfeeding. Now this, in the madhab, there's a difference on how to deal with this. Basically, if she's worried about her health, all she has to do is make it up. If she's worried about her child's health, right, she has to not only make up, but she also has to pay fidya. She has to pay for every day. There's a fatwa of Ibn Abbas where he actually says a woman who has consistent children, like, for example, she has like 5 kids. How many years has she not fasted now? The minimum 5, most likely 10. Why? Because the 1 year she is feeding. Right, so she gave birth, and then 1 year she's feeding, and then this is happening with 5 kids. You're talking about 10 years of not fasting, approximately 300 fasts, 300 fasts. It's approximately more or less 300 fasts. For this person, Ibn Abbas, he would actually give the fatwa and say what? It's okay to pay. So to pay for 300 people, you can pay them all at once.
Constantly ill.
Huh?
Chronically ill.
Yeah, it would be that situation would be chronically ill. So she could back pay that, but going forward, what should she do? Can she pay now? Like, okay, she's had her kids, she's breastfeeding, everybody's out of the breastfeeding stage, and Ramadan comes and she's healthy. She fasts, right? She fasts. Yeah, we're talking about someone who has fast to make up. And lastly, the one who is permanently in a permanent condition, whether it be to old age or whether it be due to terminal illness or terminal condition. These people actually, all they have to do is pay. They don't need to worry about fasting. Tfadal.
You said about 10 days.
Yeah.
But is there anything minimum that?
That's a good question. It's basically anything that an individual would find difficult to make up. Yeah.
If the person has like what they believe to be a permanent condition and they get better, they have to make up all the fast that they didn't fast before?
No, because they believe that they were in a permanent condition.
Okay.
So if the situation saying, for example, a person, last time Allah, may Allah protect us and our families, has cancer, right? And they know for sure, there's no way, like the person who is on treatment, they can fast. So what do? They pay. And one day what happens? Allah gives them shifa. What do? That's it. They going forward, they fast. Because during that time, they were actually what? Excused. And now that the excuse is gone, going forward, they would treat it like that.
How
Yeah.
would they pay? Like,
Oh, you pay for one meal for one miskin for every day. Yes, if you know your condition is like that and Ramadan starts, you can pay all 30 days up front.
So 1 meal
Per day that you missed. Yes.
And how do you pay that?
You actually pay it in a wajibah. You actually pay it in the form of a meal. Nowadays, the modern representation of it is you can actually give it to organizations who go and they'll feed on your behalf. Ideally, what should happen is that you give it in your locality. And we had talked about this before, but alhamdulillah, our brothers, Hanafi brothers, you know what I mean? They give us a little bit of room and we can actually send it out to other places. Based on, but why? Because for them, when it comes to going outside of your locality, there are 2 things that they say to keep in mind. One is need and the other one is merit. Okay, for example, giving to a student of knowledge, that person has a higher merit than just a lay person who lives in the locality. And the need, if the need is greater outside, it's khilaf al-awla, right? It's not the best way to do it, but it is a permissible means of actually giving it. Yeah. Yes.
Can we pay to a non-profit organization?
No, this has to go to a Muslim. Yes, it has to go to a Muslim. Because what is it? Basically, it symbolizes that you're helping, because I wasn't able to fast, at least let me help this person break theirs. Yeah. Any other questions? Otherwise, we will break for Salah, inshallah, and then we will have our Tazkiyah class after Salah. So I do a Tazkiyah class after Isha, if you would like to attend today. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك جزاكم الله خير